The way code moves from idea to production these days is shifting under our feet. This would traditionally be known as the SDLC, how we develop code, and it is really in need of some evolution. And it all really started to become clear with a very small, almost unnoticed button put out by Codex Cloud. I want to show you exactly what I think is happening and why we need some changes. Okay, let's start right here. This is a little NFL application that I've shared before. It just shows the schedule of the NFL games, and inside of it, you can select a game and show the scores if it's completed and it has scores. Okay, I have a little animation there that you probably noticed when I show the scores, and that shows up every time that you show the scores. Just gives you an idea of who won. That's excellent. I kind of want to tighten up this animation and make it a little bit more exciting. So that's the request I want to put in. But of course, I'm not coming with an initial design. I'm just coming with a desire. So in that case, what I want to do is put in a single request. Okay, so that brings us back to Codex. And here I'm using it on the web. I have also connected my NFL application that's already part of GitHub. I have a repo hosted there. So I've connected that. That's what you're seeing. And I've asked for a little bit of a prompt that says, take this and turn it into a more exciting kind of animation when we show scores. All right, simple enough. So what's so amazing about this and why this starts to show or really begins to bend what our current tools can do is because of this button that's almost invisible. It is this tiny little 1x button. This 1x button, if I select it, gives me the option to select how many versions of this request I want to execute. And these versions here in Codex on the web will kind of execute together and stay as a group, which conceptually makes a lot of sense. So what we'll do is we'll kick off 4 versions of this request and then let that go off and cook. Okay, our versions are building along. Here we are in Codex again, and all 4 of the versions are currently building. And in fact, in version 1, you can see where it's already at the test stage to verify that the tests still pass. You can see that it's starting the application inside of its own little VM that it builds. And that's kind of a neat little hint at what I think we might be able to enable to some degree to help ourselves in the future. If this can start the server to run the tests, it can start the server for other reasons. So all we have to do is wait for this thing to finish building these 4 versions. Should be done soon. All right, just for fun, let me show you that it's not just Codex that causes this problem. Not surprisingly, I'm going to jump over here to Claude Code. I'm going to put in the same request that we have on the other side using the same repository and kick that off. And in fact, when this kicks off a new request down below, what I will then do is paste in another one so that you can see that what we're doing is sending off 2 requests, and it really can be iterative. You can send off as many as you like doing it that way. I just wanted to show that this works for any of these systems. It's not just the one that has this cool little drop menu. People are already doing this. I'm not the new one to find this. I just wanted to show if you don't have that drop menu and you're using Claude Code, you've got this already. So interestingly, the difference at this point between Codex and Claude Code that we were just looking at is Codex holds everything and all of their changes universally, not just the ones with these, variants that we're creating, in its own VM. So what it's doing is it's keeping all of this information here within this environment, saying, until you tell me that it's good enough to move into GitHub, we're just going to pretend like this is a different laptop that happens to be sitting in the cloud for you. Because if you make changes on your own laptop, it doesn't automatically swarm up to GitHub either. So this is their pattern. How do they solve the problem of multiple variants, but none of it's in GitHub? I've complained about this in the past. Now let me show you how they've done this. And I think it's very elegant, but it also has the risk of really causing struggle for some people. Okay, and that brings us down to, at this point, Cursor. Now, this could be Visual Studio Code or other systems that are based off VSC. I use Cursor just because it's the system that I have. In fact, I use Cursor every now and then. So what you'll see on my right panel is the normal Cursor panel, but there's also a Codex panel. So when I click the Codex panel, you'll see that we have the add celebration item right here. But if I select this conversation and go into it, you'll see that basically what we're looking at here is what we were seeing on the other side. Let me clean up just a second. Okay, so all I've done is really expanded out our Codex window here so that we could read a little bit better. And I apologize, I'm going to be scrolling around a little bit because I'm trying to keep the font pretty big, but you can see the 4 different attempts that we have. Attempt 1 completed with these changes here, 617 changes, and then attempt 2 and attempt 3. So really the concept that what Codex is doing is they're holding all of those changes, if you recall, in their VM. They don't exist anywhere except in that VM, which is a little bit odd because that's like saying, oh, I have that on my other laptop. There's no good way to get to it unless you ship them up to GitHub or something like that and say, yes, let's make a PR out of them. That's one way to do it. And we could have gone to each one of these attempts and said, create a PR, create a PR, create a PR for each one of them. That would have been perfectly okay. But that all of a sudden creates this pollution, and it really starts to hint at what's going wrong with some of the workflow and how this is really starting to kind of stress the tools that were there built on a singular path of code. So let's take a quick look at the way that Codex wants us to take a look at this, which I think is, quite frankly, pretty elegant, but it has some fault points that I want to point out very quickly. Okay, so side by side, I have the application hosted here. I am on a clean main, which just means I've checked out the main kind of branch here, and I don't have any changes locally. What's happening on this side, again, are the 4 variants that we created. If I pull up this side, you'll be able to see that there's this apply button, and it says apply changes and continue locally. So this is their idea. Again, I'm in the Codex panel. You will not see this in other panels. The Codex panel is the one that understands how Codex Cloud works and is working directly with it. So if I hit apply on attempt 1, what's going to happen, we won't necessarily see anything. Oh, we did get to see it this time because we had a score already showing. We won't necessarily see any changes over here as the code applies, but when we pivot into showing scores, we get to see the animation for attempt 1. Okay, that's pretty good. It at least definitely is telling me who won. All right, so that's attempt 1. And this is the idea, is they want you to apply these changes and to check them out. Now, understand, I'm applying these changes and checking them out locally. Of course, everything I'm sharing here feels local because you're seeing me shoot a video of it. But in reality, when I submit these things that we did like in Codex, I'm very frequently not at my computer, and I don't want to have to get to my computer to finish the work. And so this is requiring me to come to my computer to check it all out. That just makes sense to some degree from an SDLC of the past, where everything kind of went through your desktop to some degree, and you had the human in the loop sitting there at a keyboard. And in the future, when I'm going and just typing something in on the bus, which actually does occur, I don't want to have to wait until I get back home and be the actual bottleneck to progress. And this is requiring it. So what we're seeing is me at my desktop having to hit the apply button. Let's go back to this one. We will take those changes back out, go to attempt 2, and we're going to apply changes of attempt 2. That one doesn't work. We'll revert it. And this was the example I was telling you that some things will work, some things won't work. You can just move on. No reason to try to get that one to work. Go to attempt 3, try to apply that one. All right. Show the scores. Well, let's try that again. That's a very underwhelming animation of, as far as I can tell, nothing. Oh, that one worked. Ooh, that one's kind of cool. What is that? Oh, I want that. Why didn't it work with San Francisco? Oh, there it is. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I have to say, that one's pretty cool. It is letting you know which side won. It's using the color of the team, which is great. I love it. This one's pretty good. All right, so attempt number 3, very interesting. Let's revert that one, pull those changes back out. You'll notice that we will get to a clean main. This plus will get dropped off to say there's no changes here, so we just have main again. Go over to attempt 4, see if we can apply 4. It did update. Wow. I mean, it's shooting the loser. Yeah, I kind of like this one too. So this one's very cool. Attempt number 3 is very cool. Let's see that attempt 3 again. Let's go attempt 3 and apply. Oh yeah, that's the whipsaw one with all the crazy whip marks. All right, so you can tell this is an interesting way to kind of work. And this might have gotten me to a place that is an idea and not a completed version that I like. I might go, oh, that one's interesting. How about if I want to do more with it? And that leads us into the next and actual real problem of all of this, which is, well, now that I have one of these versions I like, I can apply it locally, and I'm supposed to revert it when I'm done or something like that. But now what am I supposed to do? Okay, remember when I was just talking about the idea of not wanting to have to be at my desktop to do a lot of these things? That point is really critical. I want to drive it home. we are changing the way work will be done. The software development lifecycle will not begin with keys being pressed on a keyboard. Well, maybe virtual keys on a mobile keyboard, speaking into a microphone, something like that. But as you might imagine, it's not necessarily going to be your laptop or your desktop at work that you start the code on. Very often you might kick it off by doing one of these requests like we've just seen. And in fact, doing these requests and asking for 4 or 5 versions of it so that you can just ignore the ones that had problems and move the one forward that did not have problems. That feels like a way that I think we will be working in the future, just using compute and the bitter lesson to show us a way forward to kind of fast track our development and parallelize some of the work. All right, if that's the case, I don't want to have to get back to my desk to finish everything up. So the real problem with this is going through GitHub to solve these problems. GitHub and Git are the way to centralize our code, but right now, the way that they generally work is a manual process. For the most part, you're supposed to send your branch to them. We go back and create a PR around it and say, yes, this one is ready. Can everyone else come and approve it? Somebody comes back and hits the merge button. That merge button pushes it back onto the main branch. Now, we've seen this pattern a few times so far. That's the pattern, and it's irritatingly manual. And that's the part that I think we need to adjust. So let's look what happens with the changes that we were just doing when we want to try to put them back into main or really turn them into something official. Okay, so here we are back in Claude code on the web. This is, if you remember, the one that we pasted in a couple times to get the same work done. Those two are completed here. And if you recall, one of the distinctions that we have is Claude code creates a branch when it finishes its work. It always talks to GitHub. It always checks its work in. I actually like this pattern. The problem with the apply pattern is no big deal. If you have some rigor and you press apply, take a look at it and hit revert, you'll be fine. Everything is safe. It's the moment you hit apply and then you kind of go, oh, that's really close. Let me kind of do a couple changes to it. And now all of a sudden you have to determine where I'm on main, or I was on main. I didn't check out a branch. I have to know to create a new branch after I have made changes that I can then submit as a branch, kind of the buttons that you would have on one of these systems to create a branch for you. They've left that up to you at that moment. If you use rigor and you do apply and revert, everything's pretty safe. You'll go back to Codex or something and hit create a PR on the one that you like. We'll do that in just a second. I'll show you that continuation path. What I wanted to show you here is these actually have already checked in on these branch names. So these branch names are things we're just about to see. Okay, here we are in Codex. I think we liked version 4 and version 3 the most, and these have not created branches. Again, I know I'm making that distinction quite a bit, but we don't have an active branch for this. This code is still just in this VM. I need to create a branch for version 4 so that I can get that version and put my hands on it, and a version 3. So what the button up here is create a PR. That's their way of creating a branch and a document that says this thing's ready for review, basically. And then I'll also go to version 3 and create a PR on version 3. You can do it for all of your variants, of course. So this is a really neat way to work to say, oh, once I've approved one of those, I can come back to this document and say, this one is good enough. I'm going to maybe move on with it, but I'll work in GitHub and beyond for now. So at this point, I'll just hit the archive button and let this go into my archive so it's not an open task. Okay, this all makes sense. All right, here we are in GitHub. This is what we were seeing the last time we were here. We had one main branch. Everything was nice and clean. I'm going to reload this page, and all of a sudden we're going to see a change. So here are the 4 new branches that were created. Remember, Claude Code automatically created these branches just by me requesting something. I get branches here in GitHub in the repo. All of a sudden that becomes kind of questionable that I might be littering branches into a repo if I'm just throwing ideas at Claude and maybe I don't ever even come back to check them out. I hate to admit that's happened more than once, and I have to come here eventually to clean them up and go to Claude Code and archive them there. It just creates this disconnected mess. But we also added 2 Codex versions, if you remember, variant 1 and variant 2, and these are very similar to one another. You can tell that one PR is lower than the other PR, and I'll say that this must have been, I think, version 4 we did first. So the lower PR number is version 4, and the 20 is version 3. Okay, so now we have 4 branches here that we can do something with. 2 of them have PRs. 2 of them are actually just branches and don't have PRs. All right, this ends up showing the actual trouble that I think we're going to get into when we start talking about I might be doing, instead of 4, I might do 8, 16, 32 variants to try to do something very complex and see if one can succeed. If one gets far enough in that success and it passes enough tests, I can just literally delete the rest of them and not care that all the others got to the exact same point or not. That doesn't matter. I can just take the first one that wins and move on to the next level, do the same thing again and again. If I do that, I end up getting 32 branches here, potentially, if I use Claude or something like that. That's a real problem, obviously. This turns into a real nightmare. How you manage branches here and what branches are generally for is not that. It is not for exploration. The idea is not, here is a series of potential discoveries. We're going to create a branch for each one of them. Feel free to manage it yourself. These tools need to change. This breaks. This really starts to hurt. And the manual process of having to come here and approve them, create PRs, merge things, go down into your environment, check out one of these branches, verify it, all of that stuff, that really gets quite painful. For example, let me show you how to check out one of these Claude code branches. All right, I'm going to copy that branch name. I'm going to come back here to cursor. I'm going to paste in that branch name so that I can check it out. All right. And that's not enough because there may have been changes on that branch, as we can see. So let me install any of the dependencies it might have. All right. Get the server running again and then try to run that version. Whew. All right. Turn that one off. Turn it back on. Oh, that's pretty dang good. All right. So let's turn some of these on. Purple, blue, gold. I like this. This is pretty good. This one might be one of my favorites. Okay, let's check the other one out. All right, back to GitHub and which branch was I on? Now I can't remember. I'm gonna hope that I used that branch. Let's try this branch. All right, back to cursor. Let's just check out the branch first, just in case there were changes on that branch. Get it running again. And wow, this one's a little bit problematic. So, okay. So let's get back to GitHub and see what we want to do with all of this noise. Okay. All right. So back in GitHub, we have 2 branches that we like and 2 that we're okay saying no to. We liked one Claude and we liked one Codex. We really liked both, but I think the lower one, the first one, was version 4. This is what I mean. So these tools are not at all intended for this. Right? There's no good way to identify what's going on here. And the names are so close that I would need to go back to Codex, figure out which one created which PR, come directly into it. Here, let me show you that. That's an easy way to see what's going on. Okay, so back in Codex, you can see that we moved version 3 and version 4 to PRs, which is great. So version 4, I think, is the one that we liked. And remember this button I was saying, this button is very useful. You can click directly to the PR itself, and now I know which one I'm dealing with. So there's trying to patch over some of these things. The apply button is trying to patch over, not creating a whole bunch of branches for no good reason, and being able to jump directly to a PR is trying to patch over which one is the thing that I've just moved over that I'm interested in. It is all very complicated though. These tools are not meant for this. The cognitive cost here is incredibly high. We have got to fix this. This is going to be one of those limiting factors as we move forward to adoption of these kinds of things. I would love to see the people that work on these tools at this level taking some of these challenges on to figure out how they're going to better manage groups of requests together, maybe a higher level object here in GitHub to be able to manage awareness of branches that are similar to one another or related to one another, or better tooling on the outside that leads into GitHub. I really think that the systems themselves need to solve something because this is incredibly painful to manage, not to mention all of the flipping you've seen me doing. This is all still entirely required. Let me describe one of the changes that I do that I attempt to help myself solve these problems. Okay, so here we are on the version 4 of Codex that we liked. If you recall, we committed this or created this PR about 10 minutes ago, and I have systems that come through and attach to this application. And whenever a new PR is created on this application, they create deployments for me. And this is incredibly helpful. So this one happens to be by Netlify. I generally use Vercel for most of my applications these days because by default, I can get it to set up so that when I merge things back to main, they go to production and everybody sees them. But in the meantime, when there are open PRs that are not in draft mode, they create these deployments that then you can directly click on, and this will be the application in that form. And this allows me to actually check these things out in a way that I don't have to come back to my desk. All of what we've just done, I can do from my mobile device. So I can put in the request into Codex or Claude code and wait for those to complete, create PRs out of them, Vercel or Netlify or one of these systems that will auto-host these sample versions will put up a sample application for me. I can click on that sample application and come and take a look at it, see if it performs the way that I want it to perform. If not, I can delete the branch and the PR right there in one big move on to the next one. So this at least solves a little bit of the problem. I'm paying for this solution, quite honestly, but I think these tools need to be there for us. Remember that we saw Codex at one point starting a server to be able to do the tests and verify things? I think at that moment, I should be able to attach to that server in the same way as I'm attaching to it here. That would solve quite a bit. That in Codex, I can kind of see the variant and actually interact with it in some meaningful way. This is not a perfect solution either, with a whole bunch of security and validation problems. There's a whole bunch to deal with something like that. But it's that kind of tooling that I think we really need to solve the new changes that are coming our way. All right, so where does that leave us? First, being able to create variants is very, very cool. If you have an opportunity to do it, start doing it, give it a shot. I use it really all of the time. I'm creating hundreds of those. I will say that it's very useful for visual kind of variations. It's maybe not quite as useful for other things. I would still really lead with PRDs and smaller bytes on certain things that I want to make sure it gets right instead of building 4 of the same thing. So I'm really doing it on visual variations of things and ideation, really using it right now in a way to kind of do I think this might work? Do I think that might work? Try 3 or 4 versions of it, and maybe I'll get a good idea from it. I am definitely using it that way. But I think, honestly, that's what led me to this video. I think that is because the tools are so painful. Me dealing with the back half of any one of these that has 4 variants in it is so painful that I just don't want to do it. And that is something that we need to solve because there's so much potential back there. So I hope watching me work my way through this showed you some new patterns, or at least explain the idea well enough to understand it. I think this is coming our way in the coming 6 months. I think we'll all be doing this kind of stuff much, much more frequently. Thanks for coming along for the ride on this one, and I'll see you in the next one.